So, Wayne Rooney has been sacked by Plymouth Argyle. The former England and still Manchester United's all-time leading goal scorer lasted just 7 months and 25 games in the job, winning 5, drawing 6 and losing 14 of them, to give him a 20% win percentage, which, in all fairness, is an improvement upon his last job at Birmingham City, where Rooney lasted just 83 days and 15 games, of which he won 2, drew 4 and lost 9, giving him a pitiful 13.3% win percentage. It is a dramatic fall from grace for Rooney, who graced and lit up some of the biggest stages in world football as a player, but has now been sacked by 2 teams fighting championship relegation in the space of less than 12 months. My hot take, for what it's worth, and that is very little, is that, as a manager, Rooney isn't that bad. Don't get me wrong, I'm not claiming that he is the second coming of Helenio Herrera, or his old boss Alex Ferguson, or even that he is cut out to manage in the Championship yet. All I am saying is that there are some extenuating circumstances that explain his dreadful record beyond his own incompetence alone. Plymouth, for example, haven't done well this season, and it would be absurd to suggest otherwise. They are literally bottom of the league, but they only survived relegation on the final day of last season. They have one of the lowest budgets in the Championship, and they lost key players from last season, like their goalkeeper Michael Cooper and creator-in-chief Vinner Zaz, who was excellent during the second half of the season, on loan from Aston Villa. Look, this isn't Wayne Rooney apologia. I'm not in the pocket of Big Wayne, let me assure you. I'm just saying, I don't think that he should necessarily be the poster boy of great players turned terrible managers. I mean, aside from anything else, it's just not a very nice label to put on someone, is it? Anyway, who is deserving of being the poster boy for that label? Hey, I never said that I was a nice person. I'm not talking about great players turned terrible managers of years gone by, the likes of Diego Maradona, Hristo Stoichkov, Paul Gascoigne or Lothar Matthäus. We all know about them. I'm on about former greats who are still active in management, like Wayne Rooney, despite being absolutely hopeless at it. I am defining active as having managed in at least the last 5 years. Legends of the game like Edgar Davids, formerly a player-manager at Barnet of course, who most recently spent 6 months managing CS Olhanense in the 5th tier of Portuguese football, 2006 Ballon d'Or winner Fabio Cannavaro, who won just 3 out of his 17 games in charge of Benevento in Serie B, before being sacked with the club deep in the relegation zone, and of course, Steven Gerrard, who duped Aston Villa into thinking that he was a capable manager by winning a league title at Rangers with Michael Beale holding his hand, had a team that Unai Emery finished 7th and then 4th with in a relegation battle, and then fled to Saudi Arabia to flee persecution for crimes against football. You get the idea. Without further ado then, who was of course a great player, possibly the greatest of them all, but hasn't yet worked in first-team management, though I have little doubt that he will be brilliant at that as well. Here are 7 great footballers who are now terrible managers. 7. Thierry Henry. While Wayne Rooney and Steven Gerrard are routinely mocked, derided and pelted with metaphorical dog turds for their shoddy records in management, fellow Premier League great Thierry Henry repeatedly gets off scot-free. Maybe that's because of his alluring French accent, his more refined style of punditry, or just a certain je ne sais quoi that Wayne and Stevie, for all of their undoubted charms, do not possess with an English audience. Regardless of appearances though, one could argue that Thierry Henry's record in management is worse than either Rooney or Gerrard's. Despite being able to call upon the managerial wisdom of Arsene Wenger, Carlo Ancelotti, Aimé Jacquet and Pep Guardiola, 4 of the brightest football minds of the modern era, Henry appears to have taken more in terms of managerial prowess from Mike Petka than anyone else, his last head coach at New York Red Bulls. In fact, that might be a little bit harsh on Petka, who, in all fairness, won an MLS Supporters' Shield with the Red Bulls in 2013. Henry has no similar titles. Like a lot of brilliant former players, part of the problem may have been that Henry's first job in senior management, owing to his talent and reputation, was a pretty big one at Monaco, who had won the Ligue 1 title a little over 12 months before Henry arrived. Having honed his skills coaching Arsenal's youth team and working as Roberto Martinez's assistant at the 2018 World Cup, Henry felt ready. But back in Monaco, replacing the title-winning Leonardo Jardim, things didn't quite work out. It was a huge job. Monaco's squad had been decimated following their Ligue 1 title, their form had fallen off a cliff, and Jardim's departure was mired in a dispute relating transfer dealings. I mean, really, they should have just sacked him because of that suit. It was, perhaps, a task too great for such an inexperienced head coach, as Henry outlined his ambition to instill Arsene Wenger's professionalism while replicating Pep Guardiola's tactics. He succeeded only really in replicating Pep Guardiola's current form at Manchester City, losing 11 out of his 20 games in charge, along with his job after barely 3 months, with Monaco languishing in the Ligue 1 relegation zone. Henry had a pitiful 20% win percentage, and it didn't exactly enhance his reputation when Leonardo Jardim returned to replace him, enjoying a strong uptick in form and guiding Monaco to safety from 19th, which is where Henry had them. Still while wearing a terrible suit, mind you. Next up was a stint at Montreal Impact, where Henry won 31% of his games in charge, finishing 18th out of 26 teams in Major League Soccer in his only season in the hot seat, before departing as the Impact rebranded themselves as Club de Foot Montreal, citing family reasons during the pandemic. That was the reason why Henry departed, just to be clear, not why the club rebranded themselves. Spells in charge of France's under-21s and under-23s at the Olympics have followed, the latter being Henry's best work to date, as Les Bleus won silver on home soil in the summer, but with a squad which starred Michael Olise, Alexander Lacazette, Jean-Philippe Mateta, Ryan Cherki, among many others, in what is an age-restricted competition, that is not enough to keep him out of this 7, and from receiving some rare but, perhaps, a little bit overdue criticism. If we're talking about the disparity between talent on the pitch contrasted against records so far in the dugout, which, we are, that is the entire premise of this video, the fact that Henry was so breathtakingly brilliant on the pitch also doesn't help his cause. 6th, Jaap Stam. There haven't been many centre-backs during my lifetime who are, or were, better than Jaap Stam. People talk about aura a lot in football these days, and Stam, like Henry in fact, had that in droves, before the word was routinely used in football parlance. Whereas Henry's aura was one of swagger and a supreme self-confidence, backed up by his speed and ability with the ball at his feet, Stam's aura revolved more around the fact that he was absolutely terrifying. Cited as being 6'3" tall, it felt like he was about 7 feet tall at times. He was quick, powerful, fearless, and dominant both on the ground and aerially, giving him an air of invincibility and inevitability, especially in one-on-one duels, which he seemed to relish. That same air of invincibility has not yet followed Stam into management, to put it mildly. Following 2 years learning his trade with Ajax's reserve team, Young Ajax, Stam was appointed by Championship side Reading 8 years ago. His first season in senior management remains his best, by a country mile, as he guided the Royals to a playoff final at Wembley, where they lost against Huddersfield Town. It has all been downhill from there. The following season, Stam only made it through to March, before he was sacked and replaced by Paul Clement, with Reading fighting relegation. His next job came at PEC Zwolle in the Eredivisie, the club where it all began for Stam in professional football, but it would be a brief, rather than a fairy tale return. After just 68 days at the helm, which is fewer than 6 million seconds. In case you were wondering, Feyenoord announced that Stam would become their new head coach at the end of the current season. Stam's appointment was mildly controversial, owing to Feyenoord's fierce rivalry with his former club Ajax, but much more controversial were the team's performances and results under him. Of his 18 games in charge, Stam only won 7, which, for one of the big 3 in the Netherlands, is a pretty dreadful record. That included defeats against AZ and Fortuna Sittard, draws with Sparta Rotterdam and MN, and the final nail in the coffin was a 4-0 defeat in the Klassiker against Ajax, which left Stam's side 12th in the Eredivisie table. His successor, Dick Advocat, who was able to salvage Feyenoord's season and guide them all the way up to a spot in third, said of his predecessor, and I quote, "Jaap Stam made one good decision at Feyenoord, and that was to leave." End quote. Never ones to mince their words, the Dutch, are they? Stam saw things slightly differently, claiming that he had laid the groundwork for Advocat's success, a sentiment which was shared by all of about, no Feyenoord supporters. Following the Feyenoord fallout, Stam left Europe entirely, joining FC Cincinnati ahead of their second season of MLS football. In his only full season in charge, Cincinnati finished bottom of the Eastern Conference and bottom of the overall MLS table, before Stam was sacked midway through the following season, with Cincinnati, again, sat bottom of the league. The 1999 treble winner lost 26 of his 47 matches in charge of Cincinnati, drawing 13 and only winning 8 of them, to give him a truly tremendous 17% win percentage. It's not exactly a glittering managerial CV for someone who was so talented, and in February 2024, Stam took charge of Dos Kampen, the club where he played his youth football, in the amateur 7th tier of Dutch football. 5th, Frank Lampard. Jaap Stam might be managing an amateur team in the 7th tier of Dutch football, whilst Frank Lampard has a job in the 2nd tier of the English game, but I still think that Lampard is an even worse manager than Stam. And Edgar Davids, who last managed in Portugal's 5th tier, and Dirk Kuyt, who is currently bottom of the Belgian Pro League with Beerschot, and Wayne Rooney, in fact, who has, of course, just been sacked by Plymouth Argyle. Basically, I think that Frank Lampard is very bad at managing football teams. He got the top job at Derby County in 2018 owing to Mel Morris's relationship with his uncle Harry Redknapp, where he was able to bring in Mason Mount, Harry Wilson and Fikayo Tomori on loan, and as a result, he took the Rams from the deep, darkest depths of finishing 6th under Gary Rowett the previous season, to the dizzying heights of finishing 6th again and losing a playoff final against Aston Villa. That tremendous achievement, rather than his history as a player, saw Lampard land the Chelsea job after just a single season in management. Lampard worked his magic once again at Stamford Bridge, taking the Blues from a deeply disappointing third-place finish and a Europa League title under Maurizio Sarri the previous season, to an awe-inspiring 4th-place finish and no trophies in his debut campaign. The following season, Lampard only made it to the halfway point, at which stage Chelsea had won one of their last 8 matches and had fallen to 9th in the Premier League table. He was replaced by Thomas Tuchel, who not only turned Chelsea's league form around, climbing up to 4th and qualifying for the Champions League, but also actually won the Champions League. Following Tuchel's appointment as England manager last year, Dean Ashton made the perfectly valid and not at all brain-dead point that, yes, Thomas Tuchel may have won Chelsea the Champions League, but it was Lampard who got them out of the group stages, which, some people could argue, is the toughest part of winning the Champions League. Those people were all dropped on their heads as newborns, of course, but they exist nonetheless, and they deserve to be respected. Next up for Lamps, it was Everton, where he is often credited with keeping the Toffees in the Premier League, having arrived when they were 16th with a couple of games in hand, and guiding them all the way to 16th by the end of the season. He was sacked after just under 12 months, with Everton down in 19th and facing the likely prospect of relegation in his second season, before Sean Dyche secured enough points in the second half of the campaign to just about keep them up. A spell in caretaker charge of Chelsea followed, where Lampard lost 8 out of his 11 games in charge and had a tremendous, brace yourselves, 9.09% win percentage. Coventry City took one look at that outstanding record and said, hey, sign us up, he's clearly the man for the job. Forget Mark Robbins, what did he ever do except take us from League 2 to a Championship playoff final, where we only lost on penalties, and then an FA Cup semi-final against Manchester United, where we also only lost on penalties. Lampard has so far won 3 out of his 8 games in charge of Coventry, one of which was against Hull City, and therefore doesn't count. We lose against everyone. Since leaving Chelsea for the first time 3 years ago, Lampard's record reads, played 63, won 16, drawn 13, lost 34. If his name wasn't Frank Lampard, he'd be lucky to get a job as a number 2 at Southend United. 4th, Andrea Pirlo. There is something about Andrea Pirlo that makes you suspect that he'd be good in management. Maybe it was his on-field intelligence, conducting games from a deep-lying role. Maybe it was his unflappable calmness and composure, even in the face of immense pressure. Or maybe, and I am reluctant to use that word again, it is just the aura that surrounds him, somewhat similar to Zinedine Zidane, who has, of course, been highly successful in management. Looks can be deceiving, though, as can ability with the ball at your feet. Pirlo was godlike in terms of his vision, awareness, and weight of pass, but on the touchline, he has left a little to be desired, and when I say a little, what I mean, of course, is an awful lot. As is becoming something of a theme in this video, Pirlo may have got a big job too soon owing to his playing ability and legendary status, although, even in the context of this video, his promotion was extreme. Pirlo took over as head coach of Juventus under-23s, sometimes referred to as Juventus Next Gen, who compete in Serie C in July 2020, but after just 9 days in the job, Maurizio Sarri was sacked, and Juventus offered him the first-team job. Pirlo had barely had time to meet his new players before he was walking from one end of the training ground to the other, and in truth, while it is understandable that Pirlo and others are reluctant to turn down big jobs which may never come their way again, hindsight suggests that it was too much too soon, and Pirlo's inexperience proved costly. Maurizio Sarri had been sacked after winning the Scudetto the previous season, Juve's 9th successive Serie A title, but in Pirlo's first and only season in charge, they fell all the way to 4th place, missing out on the title by a massive 13 points and coming within 1 point of dropping out of the Champions League, in a campaign which included humiliating home defeats against the likes of Benevento and Fiorentina. Following more than a year out of work, allowing him to spend some time at his vineyard in Brescia, he accepted a job at Fatih Karagümrük in the Turkish Super League. Pirlo failed to see out the season, despite only signing a 1-year deal with the club, after winning 13, drawing 12 and losing 11 out of his 36 games in charge. He got back into management in the summer of 2023, joining Sampdoria, with whom he finished 7th, losing in the promotion playoffs preliminary round against Palermo, before losing his job just 3 games into this season, having only won 1 point. Whether he gives it up at this point and retires to his vineyard full-time, or puts himself through it all again, still remains to be seen. But he was both a better player and is an even worse manager, if such a thing is possible, than Frank Lampard, and he therefore earns a spot in 4th. Third, Henrik Larsson. We're a little lacking on goalkeepers, but you could build one hell of a 7-a-side team out of the former players featured in this video. Henrik Larsson was a late bloomer in some senses, setting Celtic back just £650,000 when they signed him from Feyenoord in the summer of 1997. Larsson was already on the verge of turning 27 at the time, and while he had done reasonably well at Feyenoord and scored goals for fun at Helsingborg in Sweden, he turned into a different animal at Celtic. Over the next 7 years, Larsson scored 242 goals in 313 games at Celtic Park, winning 8 trophies and 5 Scottish Premier League Golden Boots. It is remarkable, really, that Celtic managed to keep hold of him for so long. 2 years at Barcelona, where Larsson won the Champions League, and a famous short-term loan spell at Manchester United, where he won the Premier League, followed, before the Swedish marksman hung up his boots in 2009 and turned to management instead. His first job came at Landskrona in Sweden, which was immediately controversial owing to Larsson's ties to their rivals Helsingborg. In his first season in charge, Landskrona finished 5th in the Superettan, the second tier of Swedish football, and they were widely tipped to win promotion the following year. Instead, Landskrona spent the 2011 campaign mired in a relegation scrap, ending the season just 2 points above the drop zone. Nonetheless, Larsson was rewarded with a new 1-year deal, but he departed at the end of the 2012 season after missing out on promotion again. After taking a year out of football, Larsson joined Falkenberg, which may sound like the fictional setting of an animated Christmas movie, but is in fact a real place and a real football team in Sweden. Larsson kept Falkenberg in the Allsvenskan by a solitary point, but at the end of the season, his contract wasn't extended. In January 2015, Larsson took charge of his old club Helsingborg, Again, you may be noticing something of a theme emerging among these great players returning to clubs where they played very well, who had finished 9th the previous season. They climbed to 8th in Larsson's debut campaign, not so bad, but the following season the club was relegated for the first time in 23 years. After their relegation, Henrik and his son Jordan Larsson, who played for the club as a striker under his father, were confronted by angry and aggressive Helsingborg supporters. Larsson subsequently stepped down, turned down a job from Livingston in Scotland, and joined Ängelholm, where he was relegated again, this time from the 3rd down to the amateur 4th tier of Swedish football. Larsson rejoined Helsingborg in June 2019, but he was gone again by August, resigning after receiving more abuse on social media from supporters in the aftermath of a cup defeat against 3rd tier Oskarshamns. That was Larsson's last job in senior management, and he was most recently part of Ronald Koeman's coaching staff at FC Barcelona. An amazing player, an atrocious manager, he is just about the perfect inclusion. Second, Alessandro Nesta. I think that you could make a compelling case that Alessandro Nesta is the greatest centre-back of the last 30 to 40 years, and undoubtedly one of the greatest of all time, fully deserving of at least being mentioned in the same conversation as fellow Italian greats like Franco Baresi and Fabio Cannavaro. In fact, I would state definitively that Nesta was a better centre-back than Cannavaro, but while that is the received wisdom in Italy, from what I can tell, Cannavaro's 2006 World Cup heroics and subsequent Ballon d'Or win, contrasted with Nesta's persistent injury problems, which started at that tournament, where he was forced out in the group stage and missed the entire knockouts, means that I don't think that he quite gets the credit that he deserves outside of Rome and Milan. Basically the complete centre-back, Nesta was strong, athletic, elegant, brilliant at dispossessing opponents, gifted enough to step out into midfield, and he had an almost flawless awareness and understanding of the game. You'd have thought those would be the perfect ingredients for a successful career in management, but you would have thought wrong. Nesta went into management with Miami FC in the North American Soccer League a year after retiring, a club which was co-owned by Nesta's former Italy and Milan teammate Paolo Maldini, and had only just been founded when Nesta arrived. Albeit at quite a low level, that was probably the most successful stint of Nesta's managerial career to date, as he won 35 out of his 71 games in charge before resigning. Next up was a job at Perugia in Serie B, where Nesta lasted a single season, resigning after failing to win promotion, Frosinone, also in Serie B, where Nesta was sacked and replaced by fellow 2006 World Cup winner Fabio Grosso in his second season, with the club nowhere near their stated aim of promotion, and Reggiana, where Nesta spent another single season after 2 years out of the game last season, taking the club from 7th place to 11th. Over the summer, following all of those remarkable success stories, Nesta landed his first job in Serie A with Monza, where he was sacked a couple of weeks ago, with Monza marooned to the foot of the Serie A table, after having finished 12th last season, should be said, having lost 10, drawn 8, and only won 2 out of his 20 games in charge. Nesta's record in management is as bad as he was formidable defensively, and, as I say, he was one of the greatest centre-backs of all time. First, Diego Forlan. I say this without any additional information or insight whatsoever, it is merely an observation, but 3 of the former footballing greats turned terrible managers who feature in this 7 played under Sir Alex Ferguson, a man considered by many to be the greatest manager of all time, as did Wayne Rooney, whose sacking at Plymouth inspired this video. It is just a little bit unusual how poorly most of the players who played under perhaps the greatest manager ever have performed in management themselves. As I said, no insight, it is just an observation. Diego Forlan didn't spend all that long playing under Alex Ferguson, just 2.5 seasons, where he was widely considered to have underwhelmed, but nonetheless still enjoys cult-like status, owing to his heroics against bitter rivals Liverpool. It was at Villarreal, and subsequently Atletico Madrid, that Forlan's career went stratospheric. He scored 155 goals in 226 games for both clubs over 7 seasons, winning the Pakiki Trophy and the European Golden Shoe twice, the second of which came at the start of the Messi and Ronaldo era during the 2008-09 season, before winning the Golden Ball, the Golden Boot, the Goal of the Tournament award, and making the Dream Team at the 2010 World Cup, as Uruguay reached the semis, with Forlan being their star man. In management, however, the awards have been in slightly shorter supply, obviously, otherwise he wouldn't be topping my list of great players who are currently terrible managers. I'm not a total idiot. Forlan's managerial journey, if you like, which is really more of a car crash, just driving straight into a brick wall.
Is this a gesture? That was for real, brother.
Began with his old club and one of the two giants of Uruguayan football, Peñarol. The dominant force in Uruguay's Primera Division, along with Nacional, Peñarol had lost just one game in the league in 2018, yet they still missed out on the title, and the season before Forlan arrived, 2019, they only lost 2 games all season and were crowned as champions. Peñarol don't tend to lose many games of football then, but Forlan somehow managed to lose 4, draw 3, and only win 4 of his games in charge, getting the sack after just 11 matches. That put enough of a dent in his reputation that, despite being one of Uruguay's greatest players of the modern era, Forlan's next job came at Atenas in the Uruguayan Segunda Division. This time, Forlan lasted 12 games instead of 11. Hey, it's progress. The 45-year-old's time in management was so torturous that it convinced him to have a total career change, joining the ITF Masters Professional Tennis Tour in 2023. Forlan made his ATP debut in the men's doubles at the 2024 Uruguay Open in November, although he and his partner Federico Correa were eliminated in the first round. Nonetheless, Forlan is right up there when it comes to football greats who became tennis players, but right down there in terms of football greats who became managers. It's just unfortunate for him, really, that this video isn't about football greats who became tennis players. That is it for today's video, but thank you all very much, as ever, for watching. Hit the like button if you enjoyed it. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments, and of course, it goes without saying really, doesn't it? Make sure that you are subscribed and have notifications turned on, not just for this channel, HITC Sevens, but also my second channel, Alfie Potts Armour, both of which should be about to appear on your screens now, along with a couple of videos that you might enjoy watching after this one. You can also find me on all of the various social media platforms if you are so inclined. They should be available via the link in the video description, along with a whole lot of good stuff, including those that I just mentioned. Cheers, and have a bloody brilliant 2025.